Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, I got a couple of rejects with us this morning, and this afternoon, and we will be talking about the Enneads with Eros. Very excited to cover this topic or this stuff. This was associated with Plotinus. People haven't listened to my Plotinus episode. I highly suggest to go listen to it. Tons of info in there, and you will hear about the Enneads. But before we get to the guest, I'm going to introduce the other rejects on the show. And today we got the lovely Lisa with us. What's going on? The Occult Reject Mad Scientist. How are you?
Good. Thank you for inviting me on, Nick and fellow rejects. I'm very excited to hear about the Enneads. I listened to Nick's Plotinus, and so he touches about the Enneads, and Eros Up is going to go deep down into it. So I'm very much looking forward to that. You can find me on Twitter, Solis Lisa, or occultresearchinstitute.org. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Headless Giant, what is going on, sir? How are you?
How you doing? You can find me on Twitter and on X, or X and Twitter. I guess they're the same thing. And you can find me on YouTube. Look up the Headless Giant podcast. And I love the topic. Plotinus is so influential in early Christian thought, late antiquity thought. And it's a really interesting bridge between the two. So I think this is going to be a great episode. So check me out on Thursdays. Me and Nick do a show where we read your occult email. So send them over to the Headless Giant Podcast at gmail.com, and he will send you some stickers if you include your address. So that's great. Tomorrow we have the trilogues with Ethan and Ricardo. So check that out early in the morning. And that's about it. Thank you.
Well, yeah, send in those emails. I mean, even at this point, you could be making up a fabricated story and you're going to get free stickers out of it. So, I mean, just fucking send something at this point. Jesus. Ethan Indigo, my man. What is going on, sir? How are you? Thank you for making it.
Thanks so much, everyone. I'm honored to be here. Yeah, I'm excited for tomorrow doing the trilogue. I'm easy to find on social media and frequently share writing and so forth, and have written a couple books. And Nick, props on your Plotinus show, and I'm excited to learn more about all this. Thanks for being here, Eros.
Yeah, thank you for joining, Ethan. I really appreciate it. Really wanted you here. I figured this would be right up your alley as well. You're kind of
long-time fascination. Anything numerological and ancient is
awesome. And finally, Eros. Let everybody know what your deal is and where they can find your stuff, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Eros Up. You can find me on Twitter, I think at Eros Up. Actually, let me double check that really quick. It might, Eros to Ethos on Twitter or X. And then I'm also on YouTube, where I've been going through the Enneads and studying them and presenting that.
Yeah, I can't even remember how I came across your stuff. I don't know if maybe you commented on a video and then I went and noticed that you had your own channel, but like somehow I came across you and I was like, yo, what's the odds of this girl like covering this stuff while I'm working on Plotinus? I think I had even messaged you and told you I was working on it after it came out. I was like, I'd really like to have you on to cover the Ennead. So it was like, it was even really weird how I even came across you in the timing. So I was really excited to finally get you on, because I do think this stuff, the Enneads, from the stuff that I looked at when I covered Plotinus, was some real deep shit to me. And there's actually a lot of chapters in there that are on topics that I think are actually very important. It's interesting to know that he does cover stuff on site. He does have a whole chapter that I think, people who are into the occult, you should read his chapter on Gnosticism. I think he has a solid point. But yeah, that's enough about that. Eros, what got you into, I guess, Plotinus? I'm assuming it's Plotinus. I don't know if it was Porphyry, or however you say that guy's name, that got you into the Enneads, because he wrote them. But how did you come across, I guess, the Enneads of Plotinus and other stuff?
A long journey, I guess. But what really, I would say initially, I was really into Taoism and tarot, and I practiced astrology And then I got into Thelema a little bit, and then just, I guess, weirdly Christian mysticism. And I think that Christian mysticism is really what brought me to Plotinus. And I also wanted to say that, I watch you guys religiously. Like, I've watched you guys for a long time. So I think I probably did comment on something, and that's probably, I think you're right, recalling those details. But I just wanted to thank you guys for continuously expanding my perception on things, and obviously the awesome guests that you have on as well.
Thank you. You know what I think it was? I think you commented on the premiere, something about like you're excited for this. I was like, oh, somebody actually knows who this guy is. So I went and clicked on your stuff. And I was like, oh, she covers the Enneads. That is wild. Yeah. So you mentioned Thelema. I had no idea about that. Is that kind of where, I mean, that brought you to Plotinus in a sense as well, you were saying? Is he one of the saints?
Plotinus?
Yeah, he may not be.
No, absolutely not. No.
Yeah, that would be kind of funny. That would be actually hysterical if he became a Gnostic saint.
St. Augustine was very influenced by Plotinus, though. So, and he talked about that in some of his writings. But no, Plotinus is definitely not a saint. He probably would have been murdered by the Christians.
Well, see, that was something you had interesting that you mentioned before, Thelema, and then you went straight into Christianity or Catholicism. Do you think there is? Do you think there is a? Do you think that's in Thelema?
I think that there is a tie between theurgy and Neoplatonism. So maybe in that way.
I like that, how you explain that. That's interesting. Yeah. All right, so we'll get into it, I guess. I don't want to get too hung up on that, on Thelema and stuff. So yeah, what did you pick and why? To let people know what we're getting into here.
So I wanted to focus a bit on the tractate Are the Stars Causes? So that's Ennead 2, Tractate 3, I believe. And I think it just really showcases some of his depth that maybe a lot of us don't always get to see. So I'm really excited about that.
And one thing I just wanted to add, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, just for people who are listening and may not have listened to the Plotinus episode, these were notes that were compiled by somebody else and put them into the Enneads, correct?
Right, yep. Porphyry, his student, went through the Enneads and he ordered them and published them.
And if I even remember correctly, they put it in an order that was kind of like some people question, like, why'd you do it like that? But isn't there, I think in one of his books, I think Porphyry actually lists like how if you wanted to do it in order, there is an order that you could do it in, but he just didn't put it out that way. Something like that, right?
Yep, that's right. And I think, but I think in general, you can really read any tractate independently.
Oh, yeah. There's 1,000 pages, so there must be a lot of something in there. All right, so here, I'll pull this up, and we got, sorry, what was this one again? On the Stars?
Yeah, so, yep, Are the Stars Causes. So these are just some quotes from the Enneads to kind of give us a teleological view and then also get us thinking about some of these ideas that we're going to be covering. So
one thing I did want to just bring up real quick, or I could be wrong, because there's been a few people I've covered recently that felt this way. Was he also in belief that these stars did not like put you in a cage? Like they could influence, but they were not a set destiny. Did he feel that way as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like they were a mirror, but not deterministic.
I did. Unfortunately, I feel like nowadays it's kind of looked at it like that. I think a lot of people who want to get into zodiacs or these woo-woo people, they're putting you in shackles with the zodiac, in my opinion. Or they'll blame the zodiac when they're acting out. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's why it's so important, is because he provides sort of a philosophy behind it instead of just saying, here's the stars, here's what they do. He's actually making the distinction between these are the influences and these aren't your actions. It sounds like they were having the same problem back then as well.
Probably, yeah, probably.
Yeah. And I think it's a response to Plato's Timaeus, right? Because Plato did think of the planets as gods and of like having will themselves. And so it's kind of just a response to that and expressing his differing opinion on that.
All right. So how did you what did you just want to read through this and then we'll just talk on it, what we think and stuff? So,
Yeah.
good to
Well,
me.
yeah, I can just I'll just run through this and just feel free to stop me at any time for questions or if you want to provide any insight.
All right, sounds good. Works for me.
All right. Bear with me through these quotes, but I think that they're important because they really show the nuance of the one, and then just kind of some of these other ideas that are going to follow up from it. So, okay. The one is perfect because it seeks nothing, has nothing, and needs nothing, but instead it overflows, and this overflowing is creative. The one perfect and full generates from its own superabundance.
I love
And
that shit. Everybody, sorry to jump in already, but that was like totally Kabbalah right there. In my opinion. That's like Catholic.
Well, that's funny.
I used that quote in my episode. That's how I love that quote.
You know,
That's
I don't know
awesome.
much about the Kabbalah, so that's interesting.
I was gonna say it's so Taoist. It's like almost directly in correspondence with the I Ching or some other similar work. And in fact, to that, I wanted to ask Eros, what you mentioned that you're into Taoism. What aspect of Taoism, and did you find, I mean, other aspects of the Enneads that may sound Taoist or have Taoist elements?
Yeah, I feel very far removed from Taoism now. You know, I studied all of that, like, I don't know, close to 8-10 years ago. And so, you know, I only remember some of the big principles. I did a lot of Tai Chi back then. But the idea of kind of becoming one with the cosmos, I think that definitely aligns to Plotinus, like his ultimate teaching of returning to the one. It's a very similar idea because it's different than, you know, it's different than nirvana, so to say, I guess, if you were to compare Buddhism and Taoism.
Are you familiar with the Eleatic school of philosophy with Zeno's paradox and all the rest of that stuff, like 500 BC in Greece?
I'm not.
Well, that sounds like where he's getting this from. On Nature, they talk about specifically how everything is an emanation from the one thing. And then they go through all of the gods and how that sort of relates back. And that sort of ethos you could see through Plato and, you know, all of his people. And then right up to the Neoplatonists. It's like this was the surviving thread that seems to come through in Kabbalah, Hermeticism, all that stuff.
All right.
All right, so we'll try the second one. We'll try not to interrupt her again.
No, it's great. It's great. In the active vision, the seer and the seen are two, but here in the one, they are not yet two. From this unity, the vision is born, and with it, the distinction of knower and known. Thus, from the one arises multiplicity. All things are different from one another because each draws from the one its own share, not as if divided, but as each, according to its nature, receives what it can. In this way, the one is present to all, yet each is distinct. The one overflowing produces something other than itself. This other turns back towards it and becomes intellect, containing all things different within itself, yet unified by their origin. If there were no one, there would be no number, but only non-being. Because of the one, there are two, and so multiplicity. From unity, difference is born, but the one itself remains without difference. And then the last one, intellect springing from the one is the first to contain difference. It thinks itself, and in doing so, it contains both the thinker and the thought and the many beings which it knows.
Nice. You know, a lot of that is still before you go on. I mean, it really does remind me a lot of the Kabbalah. There was even one, the one overflowing, producing something other than itself. This other turns back towards it and becomes intellect. That right there even gave me the whole idea of Chokmah, because that's like coming face to face with God. And obviously, like if you're going to keep going down the tree, you're turning the other way. Because of going up the tree, coming face to face, you know, you're heading a different direction. So just a lot of, and even like recently, I think when I was covering the Kabbalah, I had taken like a quote out of Gareth Knight's Kabbalistic book, and it was very much like even describing how like Kether starts off and like everything exists due to Kether, and everything like kind of was created falling from that. I mean, it's like the same thing you're hearing here. You know, it's within everything. You know, even like in the Tree of Life, when you look at the four worlds of each sphere, there is like this, the middle one, or the one right in the smallest one in the middle, is supposed to be like the God essence, or like the God idea of God in that sphere. And that's pretty much like how I feel like this is describing how it's in everything. Like even I think Plotinus was saying that's why he didn't agree with the Gnostics, is because if there's existence, God is in there somewhere, and it's not bad. You know what I'm saying? So it's within everything, you know. It's very Kabbalistic to me. I like it.
As well as the Emerald Tablet of Thoth. It's almost like 1-to-1 of the Emerald Tablet. It's right there.
Or I'd even say Kabbalah.
I was going to say that this particular part of the one where these quotes are talking about, it immediately brings me, when it says the one and it says the beginning and it seeks nothing and it just interprets, and then as it begins it turns into itself. It reminds me of what the Pythagoras used to represent the metaphysical being, the monad, which you have the circumpunct. And when you look at the circumpunct, it looks like an eyeball with the iris as the white part controlling the aperture of the pupil itself, and that is the representation or interpretation of reality. And as the pupil ingests the message of light or the message of the photons, it then turns into itself on the retina and then back into the actual optic nerve to interpret and begin the process of reality, or begin the interpretation of reality. And that is at the beginning, but it also is at the end. So it's like an actual circle, like coming back to. So it's, you know, the one, we came from the one, and then we will return back to the one. And you see that kind of like lay out in most of the quotes that you selected. So I just wanted to insert that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like that does all tie into everything that we're going to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Better. All right.
So all of these ideas are that the one pours out of itself to experience the multiplicity of existence. Almost like it's based off of differentiation. So it's almost like a constant state of gnosis or novelty producing. And so I like to tie it to this principle of chaos. And I think you'll see that I think Plotinus does parallel that a bit. And this is echoed in multiple creation stories, right? It's like the Orphic creation story. You have the cosmic egg, which represents unity, and then Phanes emerges, and out of him, multiplicity and ordered cosmos. And then the Egyptian creation story is similar. Sometimes, like there's this infinite potential, and sometimes a unified egg, and then from this egg arises a god or a creator, and out of them the multiplicity, and then hermeticism as well, right? A primordial chaos identified with the mind, which brings awareness and order to what was previously undifferentiated. I feel like that exactly ties into what we're going to be talking about. From this differentiation and ordering, the cosmos becomes alive and structured, and all living beings emerge, each reflecting aspects of the original unity that was contained within the boundless chaos.
Okay.
And then that just brings it to, how is the one kind of represented in different schools of magic? I think it's kind of interesting to talk about how it's seen differently in different schools of thought. Like Hermeticists believe that chaos is ontological, and that it's a fundamental nature of reality. It serves as the substrate from which all order, form, and life emerge. The focus is on chaos as something to understand and align with, rather than something to manipulate. But for chaos magicians, they believe that this is like a primordial soup that can be shaped like a stem cell or a source of, creative potential. And
What about the electron?
Huh?
What about the electron? So, for instance, if you think about photons, right, and the speed of light being the upward limit of the entire visible frame of reference, right? Back to what Lisa was saying about how the divine is sort of an emanation that can be reflected in the way that we perceive the world. And so the upward limit of light would be the, speed of light. And that sort of represents the God of this world, because they can't imagine a place outside of the speed of light. That's something that a lot of scientists have no idea what they're grappling with, but we do know that it exists. So it's almost like the spiritual realm exists outside of the light world that we live in. That's like the upward limit. That's Phanes, again, is the god of light. And so from that, all things are emanated. It's almost like they're describing physics at the same time that they're making these poetic illustrations.
I could see that.
Yeah, that's so interesting too, because Plotinus uses light as an analogy so often, right?
Yeah, that Neil deGrasse guy, if I'm even saying his name right, he came out with he was saying some shit one time with his boy on some show, theorizing that the reason we can't go past the speed of light is because we're in the matrix. And then the program wouldn't be written, so that's why we can't go past it.
Well, if photons and electrons are the same thing, their vibrations change
Not
the
the same
pattern.
thing,
So
sorry.
everything would be, well, it's like the energy transfer from electron to photon is really easy. So there's something going on there. It's almost like that's the matrix of realities, all these little light particles vibrating together.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
photons.
like say it's like in The Sims, and it's like you can't get to that room yet because it didn't make it.
Yeah. The photons are going to be smaller than electrons. Photons do not have electrons, but they are the elementary particles. They're smaller than the fundamental particles. And so when you get a photon, it's like zero mass and it's like pure energy. Like it is its own, message. There is nothing kind of that can change it. It's its own entity. But yeah, just FYI.
I would also think if you went past the speed of light, wouldn't that just be into the darkness?
Say
There'd
it
be no
again.
light.
Well,
If you went past light, what would you see? Nothing then, right?
that's like the boundary on
Dark matter.
the black holes.
Yeah.
Right? You've got this limit on the black holes where everything seems to freeze at that point.
The event horizon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time stops.
Well, and then that's what China is talking about matter and how, transmutation of the soul into matter. And you have to go through this process. Sorry.
I love it.
It's perfect.
You spelled your name wrong. Gave you credit.
Oh, call me whatever you want. Just don't call me late for lunch. But yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But yeah, what Headless is saying is accurate. It just the photon is like its purest form of energy. I mean, purest form of information. It's like unadulterated information. Whereas with electrons, it depends the spin, it depends the position, it depends the temperature, it depends this, blah blah blah. So yeah. And electrons belong to the actual, atom that it's circulating or whatever, or unless it's like expelled. But anyway, sorry.
That's good.
Yeah, I love where you guys are going with this.
Awesome.
I mean, I say, I didn't want to be stuck on the Taoist thing, but I guess I always am. The Taoists also have their egg creation myth, as you mentioned the egg concept before. And there's a quote here from the Tao Te Ching. Excuse me. The Tao gave birth to one gave birth to two gave birth to three, and three gave birth to the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things carry yin and embrace yang. They achieve harmony by combining these forces. And just in respect to some of the Ennead lines that you just quoted, it just kind of reminds me. But also thinking about that in terms of electron and photon instead of yin and yang, it's almost like the light gave birth to the myriad things type of thing.
So,
Double slit experiment. The one became the many things,
Oh, yeah.
The whole I love how you talked about chaos being like a stem cell, and that it can give rise to anything, and it is the primordial soup. It truly, truly is. Like that was probably the best analogy I've ever heard. Kind of relaying it to the chaos that I guess magicians manipulate for their own. And I do think, and you on the quote where it says it represents the underlying quantum-like flow of reality. Absolutely, because I feel like it can become anything. It has the potential. It is in its potential energy state. And obviously with the observer or the airbender, the soul in matter, we can manipulate reality. We are able to manipulate mass. And I've often heard that chaos is probably our inability to see the pattern yet. And so I think which Plotinus was talking about this, that we should strive towards intellectual perfectism, or right, something like that, perfection, in that it's more important to continue that growth towards understanding, and that God or the one exists beyond that understanding. And so when you look at chaos, chaos is potentially, not an artifact, but an actual. We're able to visualize the matrix, but we don't understand the matrix. And to us, it looks like chaos because we're either not stepping far back enough, or we lack the actual synapses to understand the equation or the algorithm, so to speak.
I read that recently, that same phrase right there. And I think it was in a Kabbalah book. It might have been that Gareth Knight book, saying something about like chaos. It's chaos to us because we're just looking at such a small
Yes.
little part. Actually look back more, and you would see it's a small, intricate part of a whole big moving thing.
Quantum computing. Their attempt at trying to achieve godhood.
Yo,
Exactly.
Very true. Very good way to put it.
Yeah, I think that Plotinus can really help make sense of chaos, for sure. I included in here a little bit about Imblicus, just that he believes that you need intermediaries to shape the chaotic substrate. So it's just kind of interesting how different schools of thought think of this principle.
Well, think about the principles of geometry, right? So as these lines are crossing over each other, they're creating new patterns. And that would be like these intersections, these points that govern other things and other ideas. And so the ideas of geometry were really central to everything that they were about. The Platonic solids and everything else were really meditation tools of how to understand the world, how to understand the universe.
All right, so in Are the Stars Causes, he's responding, right, to Plato's Timaeus, and he's arguing that the planets aren't deterministic, they don't act in accordance with will, they follow intelligible order, and they reflect this order, but they aren't the actual cause of the things that happen. And he uses this analogy of the universe as a single living organism to illustrate the interconnectedness of all beings. He explains that everything that exists emanates from the one, like light from the sun, without diminishing its unity. All beings, including humans, stars, and matter, are fundamentally connected to the one as derivatives of its overflow. So it's like this idea that, right, like, and we'll get into it more in the other slides, but that there's the one, and then that multiplies into a seer and the seen. And even further, when he goes into archetypes, because he talks about archetypes quite a bit, it's this idea that things mirror each other because they have little pieces of these patterns of these pure ideas in the intellectual principle, right? So like if one archetype is a piece of gold, and as a human, you're a rock, or you're like an unpure piece of gold, right? Like maybe you have the gold in you, you have this pattern in you, but you're a offshoot of it. So you're similar to it, but you're different.
Vibration and frequency, right? That's where those differences start to come in and have a geometric relationship to one another.
I mean, again, I hate to even go back to like the Kabbalah with this, right? I guess maybe for people who are into the Kabbalah, they can see a really easy connection. Or even like how I use like sometimes like the whole like light bulb thing. It'd be like kind of like the light that shines out of that container, that light bulb. Just like the farther the distance goes, I feel like the more of matter it comes into. Like it explains like how this one thing emanates and just eventually starts to turn into a more dense form as it goes along, I guess. Until it hits the wall and you have an image.
Time is a form of distance, right? So we're dealing with the time scale from the Big Bang or whatever started everything. And as it moves along and outwards, you've got different emanations that come off of the path.
Well said, sir. All right.
So I have this quote from the tractate. He says, "We may think of the stars as letters perpetually being inscribed on the heavens or inscribed once for all, and yet moving as they pursue the other tasks allotted to them. Upon these main tasks will follow the quality of signifying, just as the one principle underlying any living unit enables us to reason from member to member, so that, for example, we may judge of character and even the perils and safeguards by indications in the eyes or in some other part of the body. If these parts of us are members of a whole, so are we. In different ways, the one law applies. All teams with symbol. The wise man is the man who in any one thing can read another, a process familiar to all of us and not a few examples of everyday experience. But what is the comprehensive principle of coordination? Establish this, and we have a reasonable basis for the divination, not only by stars, but also by birds and other animals, from which we derive guidance in our varied concerns." I guess I added this example. A certain planet's position coincides with a person's birth and character, or a bird's flight might coincide with an omen of what's coming. If the cosmos is an organic unity, then different events and phenomena can reflect one another. Stars don't cause human events, the birds don't cause omens. Instead, both are coordinated expressions of the same higher order. This cosmic harmony is why divination works at all, not because these creatures or stars generate fate, but because their actions line up with the greater pattern.
I had an interesting thought. So
Go ahead, sir.
think about bird murmurations and how hypnotic it is, right? It almost puts you in a different frame of mind or a different consciousness as you're watching the bird murmurations as they move across fields and stuff. It's almost like seeing the geometry patterns of a different world. And so being able to connect images with that seems to be a very common practice of meditation, right? So you're looking up at the sky, you're seeing the different shapes in the sky and everything else. It's like you're connecting your imagination to the things outside of yourself and then coming back with new images.
I do like how like this thing was putting it at the end, and I sometimes like I would even wonder like if this kind of almost applies to, it's a little off, but like even with like the true crime stuff when we cover it with the
I was
gematria.
just about to say that exactly.
All right, you can say because I have something else that I was going to say, so go for it.
Okay, just that last sentence that you mentioned. Nick has always said that when we would do true crime, that we would look at gematria, and that he did it. It was almost as if it's not so much that maybe that the crime or the events were being done purposefully for those numbers, but that maybe the event itself echoes a pattern, and gematria is the way to decipher the pattern or decipher the number or the math that is being expressed because of the event, or that there's a linkage into being able to interpret the event through math or through some kind of numerology of sorts. But with talking about the cosmic harmony, in that that you can math your way in a way. You could math your way into the understanding of what is being said, like looking at the birds or looking at the stars. It's not that the stars themselves are influencing; it's the stars are being reflected, as opposed to blah blah blah. That's it.
You're talking about Benford's Law?
No,
Have you ever heard of this?
no.
So it's a tool the IRS uses to see who's committing fraud on their tax paperwork, because certain numbers have a certain mathematical frequency that happens in natural numbers versus unnatural numbers. People don't know about these frequencies, so they'll put the numbers in the wrong order or the wrong proportion, and you'll know that somebody's fooling with the numbers. So in a lot of ways, you've got a pattern to nature that goes along these basic principles. Like 1 is the most commonly used number in all of nature. So you've got to have a certain number of ones in your thing to represent a more natural number. So it's kind of crazy how that works.
That's interesting. I was even thinking of like when shit gets weird, like for conspiracy theorists, when everything starts to seem like shit just doesn't make any sense. And it just seems to be from everywhere. Sometimes I wonder, is that just like, are we witnessing something happening, but it just ripples through a bunch of shit? It just causes weird shit to happen. I don't know. It's just like sometimes like it seems like when weird shit pops off in politics and the rest of the world, it's just like a fucking huge shit comes at once. And like everywhere. Everybody's looking everywhere, and it's just weird shit everywhere. And it's just like, is there some sort of like egregore that just passed by humanity? I don't know.
That's crazy. I can't believe the IRS is coming after us with like gematria.
I didn't know that, but I've heard of that law. I had no idea they used that.
Yeah, they've got Benford's Law apps for your phone, so you can actually tell if somebody's fucking with you or not based off of the numbers they're giving you.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's like ChatGPT for fraud.
Right.
Like,
But
don't
nobody
you-
knows why it's like that. Like, there's no definite reason why numbers would be distributed like that naturally versus unnaturally. They can't really explain why that law exists, but it does.
I think it's a signature. I think it's, kind of like with true crime, whoever is the orchestrator of the crime leaves a signature. Sorry, go ahead.
All right. The comparison to the universe as one single organism is his idea of cosmic sympathy. All parts of the cosmos are interconnected like organs in the body, all part of a living whole. So it's kind of like this idea that we're all connected, right? Like if you have a body and your finger gets hurt, then the whole organism, like your whole self, responds to that, right? And he says all things must be enchained, and the sympathy and correspondence obtaining in any one closely knit organism must exist, first and most intensely in the all. There must be one principle constituting this unit of many forms of life and enclosing the several members within the unity, while at the same time, precisely as in each thing of detail, the parts too have each a definite function, so in the all, the higher all, each several member must have its own task. This is part of his argument against determinism and deterministic astrology. If stars had direct power over human fate, then the principle of distinct functions in the all would collapse. Stars would overstep their role and humans would lose theirs. But in Plotinus's metaphysics, each part of the cosmos must fulfill its proper function for the harmony of the all. We all participate in the cosmic harmony. If the universe is an organism, humans are the sensory part, intelligence is the electricity in the brain and animating the organism. In that way, gnosis or novel thought could be a new synapse from the universal brain, an interesting thought in relation to thought forms, egregores, chaos magic, etc.
Yeah, I've often said myself, I think like intelligence is electricity. Since I find that interesting. You know, they even use what I find weird about that is like even if you go back to like the magic squares, when you start messing with what people would consider angels and demons, I think it's listed like intelligences and spirits. You know, and I myself have even said I thought some sigils were actually like circuit boards or something to do with electricity. So it's just interesting how you even have that crossover intelligence.
I've heard recently that they're making the correspondence or correlation with plasma and consciousness to your point, Nick.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that. I'll have to keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Yeah, forgive my only topical knowledge of the idea, but I don't know too much.
Thank you.
What does that mean for fusion? Fusion power is just pure plasma.
Oh, just running on souls.
Right.
Shoot it at an egregore.
Shoot it at an egregore. Look, I might beat it, right? All right, so sorry about that.
Well, think about orbs and their predominance of that shape when it comes to mysterious lights in the sky. There you go. That's plasma.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I still think there's something to do with the plasma in your blood. There's something to do with magical experience.
You got magnetism. You got plasma.
Yeah.
And the development of our quality of our mitochondria leads to all kinds of changes, right? Which might be the juice in that.
Pretty good, Eros?
Yep. Yeah. Just interesting because I think that too, like that all intelligence is electricity, and I've been kind of following that plasma as consciousness idea. But I'll continue. Here, Plotinus quotes, "Thus each entity takes its origin from one principle, and therefore, while executing its own function, works in with every other member of that all from which its distinct task has by no means cut it off. Each performs its act, each receives something from the others, everyone at its own moment bringing its touch of sweet or bitter, and there is nothing undesigned, nothing of chance in all the process. All is one scheme of differentiation, starting from the firsts and working itself out in a continuous progression of kinds." So we're returning to that idea of multiplicity, and I roughly just added a couple pictures, but this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is reminds me of this quote from the first slide. Where it says, oh yeah, I thought I had a quote about numbers, but that's all right. Still, there's this. Oh yeah, right here. If there were no one, there would be no number. but only non-being. Because of the one, there are two, and so multiplicity. From unity, difference is born, but the one itself remains without difference. Oops.
7 rays of light.
Oh, geez, right?
Yep.
You get the rainbow.
Yeah, I mean, the light spectrum has to be part of this this algorithm, right? And we don't even know all of those that spectrum. So he continuously talks about the one being this multiplicity principle, but obviously there has to be something limiting that principle, right? And so this is similar to the idea of, or the story of Uranus and Saturn, right? Where Uranus represents the unchecked production of multiplicity, and the castration of Uranus symbolizes the imposition of order, measure, and limit on unbounded fertility. Time divides and portions out what was previously undifferentiated. And undifferentiated also kind of means like without form, like unmanifest.
Well, think about Kronos and Uranus as being the photon, and then the speed of light limited by time. And then you've got the formula kind of laid out right there of how time cuts off light. Uranus is the god of the sky, and that's where all of these light forms come from. So you've got these geometric principles sort of embedded right there in the mythology itself. That's why I love the theogony. If you guys haven't read the theogony, read it. It's short, but you get a lot of good ideas from that.
The universal organism is not static. It's a living, pulsing hierarchy. For it to work, you need emanation, which is movement outward from the one. You need reversion. So like this relationship between the one and what emanates from it, like recursively, where they're tied together and experiencing each other. And you need limitation and form to shape the multiplicity at each level. This triad is a hallmark of Neoplatonic metaphysics. In his tractate on the intellectual beauty, Plotinus makes it to the Kronos myth. He says, the god fettered, as in the Kronos myth, to an unchanging identity leaves the ordering of this universe to his son Zeus, for it could not be in his character to neglect his rule within the divine sphere, and as those sated with the authentic beauty seek a lordship too recent and too poor for his might. Ignoring this lower world, Kronos, the intellectual principle, claims for himself his own father, Uranus, the absolute or one, with all the upward tending between them, and he counts all that tends to the inferior, beginning from his son, Zeus, the all-soul, as ranking beneath him. Thus he holds a mid-position, determined on the one side by the differentiation implied in the severance from the very highest, and on the other by that which keeps him apart from the link between himself and the lower. He stands between a great father and an inferior son, but since that father is too lofty to be thought of under the name of beauty, the second god remains the primally beautiful.
Well, that gets right into Venus and Aphrodite, because what happens after the severance, you get the rise of Aphrodite from the sea foam, where he threw the member into the ocean, right? So it's almost like love is the principle that then binds all the rest of the forces together, sort of like the underlying principle behind all of it.
That cosmic sympathy, I guess. All right. If differentiation were unlimited, you'd get sheer chaos, infinite, indistinguishable multiplicity without coherence. Plotinus insists that to be intelligible, things need form, something that defines what they are, limit, a body that distinguishes them from other things. When multiplicity is given limit, it becomes structured multiplicity. The many are arranged in relation to each other. Each one is distinct and knowable. The whole forms a pattern or harmony rather than random fragments. And then an example is music, right? And I think that music is a great example of these forms. So like if you had infinite sound without limit, it would all just be noise, but it's shaped in by ratio and measure into melody and harmony. All right, and then Plotinus says, soul then, in the same way, is intent upon a task of its own. In everything it does, it counts as an independent source of motion. It may take a direct course, or it may, I might have misspelled that, divagate, but
Deviate?
a law, huh?
Deviate, maybe you're supposed to say? I don't know.
I don't know. But a law of justice goes with every action in the universe, which otherwise would be dissolved and is perdurable because the entire fabric is guided as much by the orderliness as by the power of the controlling force. And in this order, the stars, as being no minor members of the heavenly system, are co-operators contributing at once to its stately beauty and to its symbolic quality. Their symbolic power extends to the entire realm of sense, their efficacy only to what they patently do. For our part, nature keeps us upon the work of the soul as long as we are not wrecked in the multiplicity of the universe. I wish I had my book here next to me so I could just look up what that word was, but well.
It's okay.
So yeah, I like this because this just ties it all together. That there's this law of justice and that there is limitation. And
I think that's what all this reality is about, is the limitation and being put in form.
yeah, it seems like there can't be form without limitation.
And I think, messing with magic or whatever they consider, what was it, hypnosis they would call it? I would think that would be unraveling those limitations, breaking those limitations.
Back to Mercury again, right? So Mercury and Saturn are associated. You've got that same sort of thing going on here.
Well, yeah, that reminds me too, because like if you start looking into Ian Blickus, he believes in like Hecate as a psychopomp that can traverse through like the world soul and the and Nous, and I think other trains of thought would definitely consider that to be Mercury, right?
Well, they both have a similar psychopompic quality, but I think one is the projective, one is the receptive, and the three-headed goddess would be the receptive version. She's associated with dogs as well, so there's some sort of black dog association and snakes. So you've also got the keys, and in a lot of ways, if you think about Vaticus, the goddess who was on top of that mountain before they put the Vatican there, really has that same sort of quality as Hecate over in Greece, or Turkey, actually. So the two keys of the Vatican flag might be associated with some sort of a control of goddess worship. Just a thought.
They only have 2 instead of 3, right?
Right.
I think that there is some, like, people have made some relation to, like, Asteria and stuff like that, and that makes me think of goddess worship a lot.
Was that
Well, they had,
sorry, go ahead,
What?
Headless. No, go ahead.
well, they had a lot of association with the daughter of Demeter. Well, yeah, daughter of Demeter when she was kidnapped by Hades, right? And so that idea goes back to Mesopotamia as well. They have this goddess going through the underworld, being stripped of different articles of clothing until she's finally at the center, and then she's got to rise again. So it's this springtime kind of Easter association. And then you've got Nergal, which is like the complete opposite of all of it. And he's like this bloody god who rises in the spring to wage war on all the rest of the tribes because, you know, to them, spring is at a time of flourishing and everything else. That's war season. That's when you go over to your neighbors and you steal all of his stuff season. So it's kind of interesting how these different gods and goddesses and associations are really heavily into the culture, and you know they still have a reflection of each other, though.
When it comes to him talking about the stars and stuff, do you think he's putting it in the sense that they're not stopping you from having the experience of hypnosis? Or is it saying more of like it's not like or it's, you know, something to that degree? Or do you think he's saying like it really doesn't impact your daily life that much or stops you from achieving things? How do you think he's like meaning it in that sense too, when he talks about the stars not impacting us as much as others think?
I think that he would agree that the stars, well, not the stars, right, but the pattern that the stars are mirroring definitely has an effect on the material world. So it can affect things external to you and maybe your bestial form, but it's not going to affect the soul within because that's independent, you know, and that's just kind of attached to you by choice. But I think that he would believe that it's up to us to kind of contemplate the soul and contemplate the higher sphere so that we can we separate ourselves from the bestial world, which would be more ruled by those patterns and stuff like that, and you become more aligned, and then through that alignment with the higher sphere, you know, you would explore that and contemplate and eventually through that contemplation and this act of dialectic, you would reach hypnosis. So it's about kind of overcoming the bestial and becoming in alignment with the higher sphere.
I think it works on the same level that, you know, magic works in the system. Everything is associated, and we can choose those associations to some degree. And so by making those new associations through actions and everything else, and symbols as well, you can kind of move from one area to another in the same way that, you know, free will acts on nature. So I think it's all about associations and how these associations play out, you know.
I think
Yeah.
also we have to kind of consider, as with, and I think Nick and I kind of went into all that whenever we were looking at the gematria and numerology and isosophy and all that other stuff, you have to keep in mind what was happening at the time when all this was being thought about, or thought upon. In that, was this kind of like a pendulum thought from the current thought that everything was ruled by the movement of the stars? In that, were they existing in a time where the stars dictated everyone's actions, thoughts, behavior, whatever? And so his I guess rebuttal to this is that maybe it's not. And I agree, but I think a lot of it too is that I think some people take it all the way to the other side. And I think when we forget what was being said, we kind of, listen to the extreme part of it, not keeping in mind that at the time everybody was all the way on the other side. So I don't know, just something to kind of insert.
What patterns do you associate these stars with? I mean, all of them are associative, so there have to be some sort of relationship based off of the associations in our minds. The way we associate concepts and ideas are basically how we live out our lives. And so if all you're doing is trying to connect the dots with these stars, you're not going to be doing much else. And so it becomes determinative at that point.
I think it's all, I think you have to keep it all in context. I think it's all true. How do I say that? I think there is truth in every single theory and every single concept. And it's like when they say contemplate the soul, I think it is that indicates that we have to look upon each theory or thought or philosophy and tease out what is truth and what is not. And that percentage varies within our own experiences. So one truth for one person is not going to be absolute truth for another. And that's when you say, you contemplate the soul, like what is true to you, and then be ruled by that.
Right. Plotinus would definitely, he speaks of archetypes a lot. And so he believes in these ideal forms, these ideal archetypes, and these eternal truths. And in his tractate on the dialectic, he talks about this kind of contemplation a lot, where it's this act of comparing and contrasting things, recognizing how things are similar, how things are different, what's true, what's false, what are eternal truths, what are things broken down to their most simplest parts. And so I think that goes along with a lot of what you were saying, this idea of kind of recognizing those patterns, to understand the role that you play, and then to ultimately recognize the one for what it is. And there's a lot of discerning that has to take place to fully recognize the one.
Something I find interesting is how I know Plotinus was big on talking about this stuff with the stars. Once like Marsilio Ficino started translating his stuff, you actually see like with him, he was Tycho Brahe and a few other people. When you start covering them or looking into them, because of them being into this, that whole idea seemed to resurge again. Like at some point in between now and then, in between these Enneads, Plotinus saying this stuff, and then it changes to where people do think it totally dictates everything, and then these people come back out because this gets translated and starts repeating it again. It's kind of funny how you'll see that happen around the Renaissance time. Marsilio Ficino and Tycho Brahe, when I covered them, they definitely had a little bit of a different of opinion of the people. They're saying it definitely can influence, but it is not keeping you in chains. And that was a difference of opinion. around that time. So it's kind of funny how this stuff comes back around.
Isn't it funny that conspiracy thinking has become the new form of dominant sort of superstition online?
Yeah.
You know, some eras it's all about the stars, and other eras it's all about, you know, conspiracy. It's almost a frequency between the two.
Yeah. And that's it. Like, it's interesting, even like what, I was thinking about that, kind of what Lisa was getting at. Is that like even just an outcome to pushing back on an idea that's just constantly being forced? You're just coming up with something different.
Right.
Yeah.
I love
Go ahead, Ethan.
in that last sentence relative to what we're talking about. For our part, nature keeps us upon the work of the soul, which is like we're all doing our own mission. Maybe it's to be the best shoemaker 200 years ago, but it's all self-development internally also. And that last part, as long as we are not wrecked in the multiplicity of the universe, or maybe one could interpret that as, as long as we're not as long as we don't become obsessed with one idea or another into a detrimental pattern, because all these things, as Lisa, you said, there's truth in so many different things that sound divergent, but there's actually truth in them, and in the different planets and the different stars. So that idea of being wrecked in the multiplicity of the universe is just like wrecked by all these ideas, maybe.
I would agree, and you know how like they say don't bind yourself to this earthly realm. Well, in essence, if you are governing yourselves by the planets, that's still binding yourself to the earthly realm, because
Well said.
I mean, it's what you see, and what you see is earthly. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Plotinus definitely thinks of the planets as just like part of the, like, no different than trees or.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I would agree. And I would almost guess that maybe at the time when he was walking the streets, people did not think the planets were also governing the earthly realm. You know what I mean? No, that's not how I want to say it. That the planets were also part of keeping you tethered to the earthly realm by looking at the planets and saying that the planets had an influence. They think that they're trying to be metaphysical or, supernatural, but he still was trying to say, no, you're still being governed by this binding to the earth.
Well, think about how important the stars would be to an agricultural or agrarian
100%.
society.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's part of an important evolution anyway, because the patterns that they recognized in the stars, opened up the train of thought that would lead to a greater understanding of the universe. So a lot of things start that way.
Yeah.
I was thinking too, with what Ethan last said about that last sentence, as long as we're not wrecked in the multiplicity of the universe, I just think of chaos again, because you don't know how it's going to overflow, and it's always going to be something different, some sort of differentiation. And we are unfortunately on the bottom of the totem pole. I mean, above rocks, I guess. But we're still, when it comes to like the intellectual sphere, we're at the bottom. So it's just that idea of like, it's going to continuously overflow into things that are different and new and novel, and you just don't know how that's going to affect you and affect the universe. So
And Arizona, that he kind of didn't he get into something? Speaking of the intellectualism, in that some people are more aware than others, be based on how many times you've incarnations, right? In that some people are going to be much more hyper aware of the metaphysical or whatever versus people that are brand new in terms of incarnations, or I forgot how he referred to it. And so when you think of, like, don't get wrecked by the multiplicity of the universe, everyone has their own measuring stick of what is real and what is metaphysical, right? And I'm saying metaphysical lightly, like, what is not, like, outside of reality. In that, based on what he was saying, some individuals are more hyper aware than others. And so you can't expect a person that is not aware of the metaphysical to have the same measuring stick that you do. And I think that when we look at the different truths, or how much is true in a theory or whatever, we also have to consider what measuring stick are we, like, what rubric are we using to gauge. And it's not going to be the same as, for me, as it is the next person or my neighbor or anything like that. And how they gauge it is not wrong. It's just how their soul is now, transversing this understanding of who it is and how it is and how it's evolving within that trajectory. I don't know.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
think about the word logos, right? So in the Greek, it would be, the word is almost pure metaphysics. Like that's, the pure state of metaphysical matter. Because as you're speaking and discussing, you're almost creating these different ideas and thoughts in a creative sphere. So you've got a connection to the universe on a personal level with sound frequencies. So in some ways, you could see that we're on the bottom of heaven, but we're at the top of hell. And maybe we keep trying to crab bucket each other back down when we could be using our speech and everything else to edify and lift up. So there's an element of positivity there, I think.
I think I heard somebody say, like, the
Absolutely.
best part of hell and the worst part of heaven. So that's where we're stuck in right now.
We're the bacon layer in the BLT. Is that where we are?
Yeah.
He definitely talks about how, like, every part of the universe is working together to kind of elevate itself to a higher sphere, right? So that's it's pretty interesting. I forgot what else I was gonna say.
One thing I did want to say about the planets, when I look at it in a Kabbalistic form, I kind of go back and look at it almost like the way I think Hellas said something earlier about frequency and vibration. I just look at it as like those planets are just different frequencies that or times of chaos, of change that we went through before we ended up in physical form. Or it's just representing that. Something like that.
Like a starting
three
point?
different frequencies.
Do you mean like we all have different starting points, kind of?
Well, I think probably the same starting point, just maybe the different reflections of the different way, different frequencies that we all went through to end up into our own form that we are in a human.
Yeah, I think
probably be like a certain. I'm just gonna make it up like this, like a certain frequency between a certain number, but then all the little stuff in between is what makes us all a little separately different than the next one. But we all fall into this one certain frequency. Something like that. And you go through, like, again, like all that different shit that, might determine, I wouldn't say maybe a height, but like just certain things like that might kind of determine like how you ended up popping out. But so.
Yeah, it certainly seems so, right? Because if the bestial you can have tendencies that can be related to an ordering of the planets at your time of birth, but you can evolve out of that, then it does kind of indicate that you do have some sort of starting point that is influenced by the environment of matter, the material world at the time of your birth, and then kind of how that material world unfolds over time is definitely going to affect you as well if you're not taking charge of your own will to like raise yourself above the material. And I think that it's interesting too, because I think like what Lisa was talking about kind of these starting points and navigating up to the one, right? Plotinus talks about these different starting points and these different archetypes, and kind of how people are naturally inclined to take these paths. So, for example, if you are really drawn to aesthetics or music or something like that, like compositions of beauty, then you might recognize these patterns and through those types of things, right? And then through reflecting on those patterns of aesthetics or musical composition, that can lead you to deeper contemplation, and then to the one. Or if you are just naturally born like more virtuous, and more of a metaphysician, then it's more of a direct path. But we all definitely have these starting points and these different patterns that we notice that will lead us to that evolution up through the intellect into the one.
Have you ever heard of nominative determinism?
No.
That's the idea that names can have an outcome on a system. So, like, if you think of a woman named Karen, that
Oh.
name is kind of determining how she is,
No.
Right. That's such a good example too of like you don't know how the multiplicity will work, because 10 years ago Karen was a fine name to have, and now it's not.
I think when he talks about how, and you were mentioning aesthetics and music composition and all that other stuff, all that is math. And I think I forgot who it was, Nick. We were talking about this, but beauty, how we perceive things that are beautiful. Just for instance, a human face. What we perceive as beauty is actually recognition of symmetry. We recognize that there is high order of symmetry on someone's face and then perceive them as beauty. And from a biological standpoint, when we see high order of symmetry and we perceive it as in our brain, then we recognize hormonally they may be someone perfect to mate with, because that means that their DNA has high order of symmetry, high order of organization, and therefore they may be the most suitable to mate with or have offspring with. And so when we think about high order symmetry, we start thinking about the Fibonacci sequence, about the golden ratio, about pi, and all these other higher order mathematical concepts. And when we get into some of these philosophers that talk about the one or the source, they are in relation to symmetry and mathematics. And there are many of them that believe that you can math your way to God. And so I think all of that kind of goes hand in hand with itself, how our brains perceive beauty, aesthetics, symmetry, and so forth. So I don't know. And the soul is usually inclined towards symmetry, whether it's music, composition, literature, or anything like that, because that is, I think, part of a reflection of the soul realizing the math towards source.
Yeah, Plotinus does talk about how the metaphysician has to become adept at mathematics. And I think that recognizing beauty is like recognizing these patterns of order in this cosmic harmony.
Yeah, symmetry for sure too. It's a really good point. Well said. Is there anything else anybody wanted to do? Oh, do you have more slides?
Well,
I don't
It-
know.
Oh, okay. I thought you did. My bad.
it kind of was it Marcus Aurelius that focused on the good, the true, and the beautiful.
Oh,
Right, he was almost making a metaphysical statement, and everybody just sort of took it as like a moral statement. But like these are ways of seeing the world that exist outside of what we know of those words. You know, there's something different and something deeper to that concept, and I think that's probably why the Stoics were so interesting to everybody, because they kind of went along that same pathway of Hermetic thinking, or Neoplatonic thinking.
Yeah, that beauty, or that um, idea of eros, right? It's almost like this drive towards the one. It's like not like erotic, but kind of like in a. I mean, that is a path to the one, right? To like recognizing patterns or whatever. But there is just this innate craving and like attraction towards the one that draws us in, that parallels in beauty and certain sensory things.
Think about the Greeks' obsession with beauty. That's the whole purpose. That they thought it was getting them closer to God in their way of thinking.
I mean, it's like even when you get into the Kabbalah, that's like an idea of a sphere. Beauty. I mean, even when it comes into like a cultism, or depending on how you're taking it, it could even have a negative connotation in a sense. The beauty of the bedazzle is what took you off the course of what you were doing. Or that made you fall in love with something other than, I guess, your commitment to being a magician, something like that.
Well, I think it's all got to line up. That's how you get harmony. Is
Yeah,
once
yeah.
You got it all in a row. That's the way it's supposed to, flourish and bloom.
I think when the beauty makes you lust, that's the problem.
Right.
But if there's anything else that you guys wanted to say or add, I think that was great. Actually, I had a really good time with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Really good.
Eros, we'll definitely have to move on to another one. We got to do on Gnosticism or something, or on site. Nice.
Yeah, we should do on site at some point.
Yeah, I would really like that. But yeah, this was really fun. I really had a good time. I appreciate everybody else jumping on as well. Was there anything that you wanted to plug, Eros, or anything you wanted to mention before we wrap it up?
Nothing that I didn't mention in the beginning, but I really appreciate you guys having me on. And it was too bad we didn't get to go over on site a bit more. I feel like I gypped you a little bit, but
No, it's quite all right. No, well, these things, honestly, there's a lot to them. So, I mean, really, trying to stick two of these into one episode could be a lot. You may not do them justice if you try to crunch them all. So, not a problem. There's, I'm not going anywhere right now, so I'm sure we can do another one down the road. So, yeah, real quick, I just want to let people know, if they have not listened to the Plotinus show that I did, please go check it out. And if you're interested in that stuff, go check out her channel. She does cover the Enneads. I will get her links. I forgot to add them. I forgot to put anybody's links, actually. After the show, I will throw in her links so you can go check out her Twitter and her YouTube. But thank you very much, Eros, and let everybody know where they can find you as well.
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at Eros to Ethos, and on YouTube as Eros Up.
And again, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad you responded. I really appreciate it. That was a good time.
Yeah,
And Yeah, of course. No, we'll definitely get you back on again. And my man Ethan, please let everybody know what's up with you and where they can find your amazing work and your books.
Peace, Eros. That was awesome. Very inspiring. Thank you for sharing. I'm easy to find on the usual social media sites, and Ethan Indigo Smith on Amazon too. I got a few books, and yeah, appreciate talking with you guys as always. Thanks for putting this together.
Of course. And go check out his books. He's got a plethora of them. So I'm sure there's one in there that you'll like. And my man Headless Giant, what is going on, sir? How are you?
How you doing? You can find me on X at the Headless Giant, and also on YouTube. And if you have any occult or strange or magical experiences that you want to tell the world about on Thursdays, you can send it to me at the Headless Giant Podcast at gmail.com. Thank you for this episode. It was a great time.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Headless. I appreciate you coming on and contributing. And lastly but not least, Lisa, what is going on? How are you? Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for inviting me on. Fellow Rejects, always great to chop it up with you. Arrows Up, you did amazing. I really, really liked your presentation. And definitely, I think with this topic, I think it was good to concentrate on just this itself, because you could deep dive into some of the other stuff way more, and we would probably not do it a disservice. We would do it a disservice if we were just kind of picking and choosing. I think like actually going concentrate on this is really good. I love that you picked the specific ones to talk about. It hit on so many different episodes that Nick has covered recently. So, and then of course Nick's amazing Plotinus. So thank you so much. Just the only thing to plug is Solis Lisa on Twitter, and please check out the Occult Research Institute.org, where some of the rejects, like Ethan and Headless as well, has contributed to some projects literarily, and checks out there, occultresearchinstitute.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I appreciate it. I'm glad you made it. I appreciate your contribution. And again, Eros, I really appreciate you coming on. I had a really good time. I needed that. It was really something that I wanted to talk about. I was looking forward to it, and it was a good way to start off my Saturday. So I appreciate it. And we'll definitely do this again. Thank you everybody in the chat. I really appreciate everybody here. There was a lot of people here from the beginning to the end, and that's what's up, and that's why I go live. And glad everybody enjoyed it. And until the next one, everybody be well.